Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to be teaching you the process for learning a new opening. So the reason I decided to make this video was I've been wanting for a long time to study the French defense in more detail. I don't have a lot of knowledge about it as far as the opening. I know a few random little lines here and there, but I really wanted to study it in depth. And instead of just doing that by myself, I thought, you know what, let's make this a video series. I don't know how many parts it's going to be, but however long it takes for me to get a good grasp on this, and I'm going to turn those into videos so that you guys can follow along and apply the same concepts to not just this opening. Like if you want to learn a different opening, you can apply these same concepts that I'm going to be teaching you through this series. Okay. Now, before I say anything else, a word of caution. If you are rated under 1,000, you might be 500, you might be 700, you might be 900. If you're under 1,000, there's a good chance the opening is not where you want to be focusing on right now. You probably want to be focusing on your tactics, getting really good at those tactics, chess principles. You can look up some of those videos on my channel. Those kind of things are probably going to help you a little bit more than learning openings. Now that being said, if you feel like, hey, I've got a pretty good grasp on my tactics, I'm ready to start learning some openings, by all means, follow along, apply these concepts, and learn whatever opening you would like to learn. Okay, so first things first, step number one is you have to pick an opening that you want to learn, and you have to pick one. You can't say, well, I'd like to learn, 10 openings all at the same time. It doesn't work that way. Chess is extremely complicated. The amount of theory that exists is ridiculous. There's a ton out there. So you have to narrow it down when you're getting started. So for me, I've decided to focus on the French defense. It's this line where black plays e6, and then after d4, they play d5. Now, the interesting thing about the French defense is you can get it if you play d4 or if you play e4, because there's a good chance that you'll transpose to the exact same position regardless of which pawn you started with, okay? And I've always found this to be a kind of an annoying opening. I didn't really ever have time to study it growing up. It's just not something that I studied, and so I don't know a ton about it. So the very first thing that I like to do when I'm learning an opening is identify the opening that I want to learn. Let's say you didn't even know what the French defense was. How would I know this? If you look over here on the right, I have this is on Lichess. There's something that is exactly the same on chess.com. So I'll link both of those down below. You can check out either one, but this is called an opening explorer. And essentially what it does, if I back up to the beginning here, it gives you all the moves that have been played from a given position. So at the start of the game here, you can see, what is that? 1 million games have been played with e4, and then d4, 908,000 games, and then knight f3. And you can just go on down the list and see all the things that have been played. And as I go through this, you'll notice that here's the French, e6, and I can just click on that. And then d4 is the most common move played, and then d5. And it's also telling me the name over here, the French defense. Oh, okay. If you didn't know that, well, now you know. And you can do this for any opening. Now, another thing that's important to understand here is this the three tabs. So you've got the Masters database, then you've got the Lichess database, and then you could search for like a particular player, or like in this case, it's defaulting for me. I think you can change that to any player, but it defaults to like if you're logged in under a certain account, it'll show you your game. So these are my games that I've played against this. Anyway, depending on what your goal is, you might want to, switch these around. So I'm going to probably stay on Masters because that's kind of the level that I'm at. I'm at 2200 level. I want to see what the top players are playing, and that's what I'm going to be using most likely as I go through this. For a lot of you, though, if you're rated maybe, let's say 1400, you might want to stay on the Lichess one here because this is going to be more realistic as far as what are the people playing at your level. Okay, so just be aware of that. And also, while we're talking about this, the settings gear over here, if I click on that, you can filter by time control. So if you only want to see bullet games or blitz games or standard games or, classical or correspondence or whatever, and also the rating. Now I've got everything selected, but let's say you're a 1400 rated player. Maybe you want to, deselect all of these and just kind of see these three rating ranges that are around your rating. You could get an idea of what are people playing here as opposed to, everybody. Okay. And these are going to be different. So like, for example, if I select like these lower ones and then I say, okay, what are, people playing? And as we go through some of these lines, you're going to see it's very different than if I go to the Masters, right? Especially when you get to the complicated positions where they might not know the theory, you're going to notice some major differences. Let's see if we can find an example here. So c3, knight c6, knight f3, queen b6. I think bishop d3 might have some traps in it. C takes d4. C takes D4. Here you go. This is a good example. Notice, remember, I have it set to the low rated players, 400 and 1,000 rated players. Okay. And what do you see the move that they're playing here? Knight takes D4. Knight takes D4. Queen takes D4 1,200 times. Look at this. It's actually a terrible move because the discovered check here and you lose your queen, right? You see that 1,000 people here have played this and they win the queen and win the game, right? So if we go to the masters database, if I back up here to like, let's just say this position, what are the masters doing? Well, they're taking, okay. And look at this. You don't see knight takes D4 being played even one time, right? The masters just know you don't play that move. You lose your queen. They can see that, right? They play bishop D7. That's what all the top players are playing. So you can see here the difference. Now, sometimes it's beneficial to know what like people are playing, even if it's a bad move, because you want to prepare for this. You want to know in a game, oh, what do I do if they take this? Oh, I see. I take it, and then I win the queen. Okay, that's useful to know. So that's why I'm saying you might not necessarily just want to jump to the masters tab and say, okay, let's just see what the top players are playing. Like it is helpful to see some of the lower rated guys' thought process. So hopefully that makes sense. It's up to you guys what you're going to do. Like I said, I'm going to be primarily focusing on the masters one as I go through this because that's the level that I'm at, but just, wanted to mention that. Okay, so that's the first thing. We've identified the French defense. Here it is. Now I know what I'm going to be learning. The next thing that I like to do, and you do need a book to do this. So if you would like, I'm going to link this. It's on Amazon. It's my favorite chess opening book. I've recommended it before many times, and a lot of people that have gotten it have said it's a great book too. Fundamental Chess Openings. What I like about it is it's going to give you enough details about an opening that you're going to feel comfortable understanding like, oh, okay, these are the options that I have. I might want to play this. I might want to play that. I could try this. I could try that. My opponent might try these things, but it's not going to overwhelm you. There's some other opening books that are much higher level. They go into like tons of variations and tons of details. And it's like, man, how am I going to remember all this? Fundamental Chess Openings keeps it where most people can remember, but it's still useful even for me as a 2,200 rated player. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to actually open this up. I'm going to go to the section on the French defense, and I'm just going to read the little blurbs about the different lines and see what jumps out at me and see what appeals to me as far as like which line do I want to play. And so just to give you an example, there's the advanced variation, right? You can see over here, French advanced. I might want to play that. There is the, what is this called? Tarrasch, I think? Yeah, Tarrasch variation, knight to d2. It has some key differences than the knight to c3, which is the main line, right? This is saying Paulson variation. I'm pretty sure this is just called the main line. Anyway, this is the Winnower, I believe. Yeah, so I know a little bit, but let me go ahead and read this, and then I'll come back and we'll talk more about what I'm going to actually choose, all right? All right, guys, so I just finished reading through I skimming through. I didn't read everything, but I skimmed through enough to get the information that I wanted, the Fundamental Chess Openings book. And my big takeaway was a couple things. Number one, the simplest and easiest thing to do to avoid a lot of complications would be the exchange variation, where you just take it, and they're going to take you back, and you get this very even, identical pawn structure. And a lot of people would say it's a drawing type of game. And if you look over here at the top, 54% of these games ended in a draw. 65% of the games after bishop d3 ended in a draw. Lots of draws at the top level, okay? Which if, maybe that's something that I'm okay with. If I'm planning on playing this against strong players and I'm okay with a draw, that might be something that I'm fine with. The other option that kind of appealed to me from reading through the intro was the advanced variation. And one of the nice things about the advanced variation that I liked was that it kind of limits what black can do. I mean, there's really not a lot of plans. And you can also see that here when you look at the database. Notice how there's like so many people who are just playing one move and hardly anything else is played, right? And after c5, we get c3. And then again, there's kind of two options here, but most of the people played knight c6. And then a few branches, but not a ton. If we compare that, let me just to give you an example. If we go back here, let's just say I played knight to c3. Look at how already I'm starting to notice, okay, wait a second, there's bishop b4, there's knight f6, there's d takes e4. All right, I have to kind of think through that. And then if we go to bishop b4, and let's just say I play the main line e5, what do we have here? There's c5, there's knight e7. There's more options for black that I have to be aware of in some of these lines. And so the branching starts to branch out quick, right? And it becomes very complicated. So for me personally, I would rather choose a line that I can study really, really, really well, and there are less options that my opponent has. So I'm definitely leaning towards the exchange or the advanced variation. So um, the advanced variation, what the book was saying was that the nice thing about this is you gain some space. So because my pawns are further advanced than black's, I have more space to work with, and black has this bad bishop. The other side of that coin is that black doesn't have any real targets, doesn't really have anything for me to attack. Whereas this d4 pawn, black is going to launch an attack, knight c6 and queen b6, and that's what black does in the French. They kind of pile up on here. So something to think through, but I think I am okay with that. Okay, I think I'm okay with that. So I'm leaning towards this right now. I'm going to check the win rates here. Okay, so it's, you know, not as many draws, which I do like. White seems to do pretty well in these lines. If we go back and just kind of compare that to this, white only wins 23% of the time, and this one 65% draw. I mean, that's a lot of draws, and it just looks kind of boring to me, right? It just doesn't seem super exciting. So with that in mind, I think I am going to go with the advanced variation. Okay, so that was probably a good 15 minutes of time reading through that and me just kind of thinking through to ultimately decide on a variation that I would like to now dive into and spend more time learning. Okay, and now again, I can either go back to the book, or if you don't have the book, I want to actually show you what I can do in the database here. And again, you could do this on Lichess, you can do this on chess.com. But what I'm going to start doing is clicking through some of these top moves. This one is very obvious to me that by far, I don't know what percentage this is, 12,300 out of 12,009. That's a huge, I don't know if it's 90 something percent. Most people are going to play c5 is what I'm trying to say. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on other moves there. And then c3. Okay, and that makes total sense to me, so I'm not going to get bogged down there. Black's attacking, I'm defending. Okay, great. What do we have? Knight to c6 and queen to b6 are by far the two ideas here. And so I'm just going to kind of click through just to get an idea, just to get a feel. At this point, I'm not really trying to memorize anything yet. I'm just kind of like, let's just see what this is all about, just to get familiar with it, right? Like, okay, black's attacking, I'm defending. It makes sense. Bishop d7 or queen b6. Okay, both of these are play. Let's just focus on queen b6 because I just want to see what happens if they just keep up with the plan of attacking here. All right. So a3 looks like a move that's pretty common. Bishop to e2, bishop to d3, knight to a3. That's an interesting move. Huh. I wonder what the idea is behind that. So, sometimes what I'll do is I'll pop on Stockfish here. So I just clicked on Stockfish to turn that on. Stockfish says A3 is the best move. Okay, so I'm going to keep that in mind. It's the most commonly played, and it's what Stockfish likes. But actually, I'm going to check this knight to A3 line because that looked interesting. So most people will take it. All right, let's just see what's going on here because I'm noticing that my knight's just kind of sitting there. What's the point? Then we take here. And some people have taken this. Stockfish doesn't seem to like that. Let's see why. B takes a3. So that, yeah, it just seems very weird to me. So I'm still kind of intrigued by this. Knight g to e7. It's not played very often. What's the idea? Bishop to d3. Knight to f5 is what everybody played. Castles. And they captured the pawn. Rook to b1. All right, so I'm starting to see maybe this is part of the idea. You get the rook involved. All right. I'm just following the only game that was played at the master level here. Okay, and while I'm doing this, notice how there's only one game that's been played between these two random people. I might want a little bit more data to go off of. So this is an example of where, going back here, I might switch to kind of where the game sort of started to get thin. I might actually switch to the Lichess database, go over here, and just crank it up to see what everybody has played in all these different types of game. We'll include classical, why not? And now I have more data to work with, right? And I can see kind of a lot of different options, all right? So now I can see, okay, bishop takes a3, b takes a3, And knight g to e7, lots of people play. Okay, bishop d3 performs the best there, so I'm going to click on that one. And a lot of people here are playing bishop d7, which seems pretty natural, right? And then what happens? Rook to b1. And white seems to do very well here. So I'm actually getting some ideas about this knight to a3 line from looking at this. All right, so rook to b1. Most people will go check. And then what's the best performing line? Yeah, Stockfish likes king to f1. So this is a very weird line. Very weird line. Rook to b8 is what's most played. And now h4 is the best move, according to Stockfish. Wow. So, oh, by the way, one thing, guys, that I'm doing is I'm looking at these moves. I'm looking at these win percentages, right? The white is the white win percentage. But I'm also looking at Stockfish. And, you know, Stockfish is telling me h4, king g1, a4. And I'm trying to see, like, did any Stockfish moves that people played, you know, turn out well? And so I see that, you know, h4 is one here. So I'm going to follow this and see what's going on. h6. Stockfish is black, and Stockfish is white is like almost +2, which is really big advantage. So, all right, this is really interesting stuff to me. So at this point, what I'm going to do is, now that I've kind of seen some of the ideas, right? You want to open up the B file for your rook, it looks like, and then you do some weird stuff over here with h4, and you bring the rook. I mean, this is funky. But now that I've seen that, I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask myself, okay, how do I feel now seeing all that about this knight to a3 line? Like, do I want to go for that line or not? And there's a lot of flexibility when you guys are learning openings like this. Like, if you like the way that that looked, play it, go for it and learn it and memorize those lines. If not, you're like, nah, that's kind of weird to me. I want to stick to the more, you know, the main lines. Let me jump back to the master, maybe a3. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to check out a3. Okay, let's see what's going on here. So quite a bit of options here. c4, knight h6, bishop d7. Okay. So, you know, here's another good example of, like, do I really want to learn all these different lines? Maybe not. Maybe I don't want to play a3. Maybe I want to play, you know, this one just because it cuts down on some of the lines. Like, there haven't been that many different moves that have been played here. So yeah, this is what I'm gonna just take some time and think through. All right, guys, so I just spent some time looking through some of those lines, and one thing that I noticed about knight to a3 is that if they don't take and trade off the bishop, and they do like a developing move like bishop d7, the other point about knight to a3 was that you just bring it back to c2 and you defend this d4 pawn. And this is one of the annoying things about the French defense to me, is that this d4 pawn is just always under pressure from black's pieces, and the knight sometimes jumps around, and it's so annoying. And so I actually like this idea of putting the knight on c2 to, like, really just defend it. Like, if you know that's what black's trying to attack, like, you can just go ahead right away and just defend that sucker. So I like that. And if they take, notice how we've got a lot of pieces defending that. Even if black brings the other knight over, we're still going to be fine. There's going to be 1, 2, 3, and we have 1, 2, 3 defending. So I kind of like that. So, you know, having looked at that and having thought about it, and it is kind of a little bit of an awkward move early on, I like the surprise value, right? If I can surprise my opponents early, that's usually going to be a good thing. All right. So with all that in mind, I have now decided that I'm going to focus on this knight to a3 line. Okay, cool. So at this point, just to kind of recap, we've decided that we are learning the French defense. We're going to focus on the advanced variation because it cuts down on some of the options. And then it seems like black's only plan is to play c5 and attack me. I defend it. They attack me. I defend it. And if they attack me with the queen, I'm going to bring my knight out. And there's kind of two lines here. There's the one where they don't worry about taking this. They just do something else. And I'm going to bring my knight back and defend. And then there's the line where they take. And I take. And they're going to take me. And then eventually I'm going to play, you know, bishop d3 and rook b1. And my king probably just going to sidestep, and my rook's going to come up and do some crazy stuff like this. That's kind of the plan. I'm like, okay, hey, if Stockfish says that that's the best thing to do, that's what I'm going to do, right? So that's kind of where we're at right now. And now I'm going to backtrack and see if I missed any main moves. And so if you remember, after, let's see, right here, there was kind of one, like they could play queen b6 right away instead of knight to c6. So I'm going to just see, is there anything different here? So knight to f3. And okay, knight c6 would transpose to the exact same thing. So I'm not worried about that. There is bishop to d7. And I'm going to ask myself the question, does that change anything? I see knight a3 on the list here. So it doesn't look like it really changes anything. And then again, c takes d4, c takes d4, same kind of deal. They might take, or they might play knight c6. Okay, if they play knight c6, I'm going knight c2, and we kind of have the same type of position. So I'm not really seeing a whole lot of difference there. So that's encouraging to me. Also here, there was bishop to d7 instead of queen to b6. So I'm going to just kind of check this. Okay, bishop d7. Does this change my plan at all? Knight to a3 has still been played a few times, but it doesn't perform as well. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to actually ask myself the question here. Is there a reason that knight to a3 doesn't perform so well here? So let's see what's going on here. C takes d4, c takes d4, bishop takes a3, takes, and knight g to e7, queen to a5 check. So this is interesting. Because if you remember in the other line, the queen would have already been on b6. Now, it could have played queen to a5 then, but black wouldn't have got this bishop move for free. Now, black didn't have to waste a move going to b6 with the queen. So that's one thing that I'm noticing as a difference here. And there's also this fork, because normally you would want to block with bishop to d2, but now you're going to lose this pawn. And do I really want this? I don't know. So this is something to think about. Maybe when they play bishop d7 and they don't play queen b6, maybe I don't go for knight a3. Maybe I play a different line here, right? And bishop e2 seems to be the most played move. And then queen b6 is played, which would kind of transpose, but most people are not going for that plan. And let me just see if is there a reason. Now I would just castle, and this seems to be pretty good for white. So what I'm wondering is why not bishop e2 and castling anyway before bishop d7? So I'm going to go back and say, okay, here, queen b6. What happens on bishop to e2 now? What's the difference? What is black going to do? They're going to take, and they're going to go for an attack either with this way or this way. Let's just say knight to h6. And if I castle, what's going to happen? Knight to f5, and black is like doing better already. So this is fascinating to me, and this is kind of a little bit more advanced, but what I've just learned from looking at these lines is that if black plays bishop d7 instead of queen b6, there are some significant differences. Namely, what's happening with the d4 pawn. Because now I guess I'm in trouble to defend because I can't move the bishop to defend or I lose this. And how else do I defend? There's 3 pieces. I only have 2. I can't get another one to defend this. So I'm kind of just losing a pawn. So to summarize, once we get this position, I have to pay close attention. Is black playing queen b6 or are they playing bishop d7? Because if they're playing bishop d7 here, I have time to get away with bishop to e2 and then castles. And notice how it's going to take black 2 moves to do this attack. And if they go for that plan, let's see, what am I going to do? I have time to get my knight to c3 and then, attack the queen before it can do anything about this. Interesting. And so then the queen moves and the game goes on, but now I'm starting to gain some tempos on the queen and I'm feeling pretty good. Very interesting. But if they don't play bishop d7, I don't have time to go for bishop e2 and castles. I have to go for the knight to a3 line. Why? Well, because if they go for this plan of attacking my pawn, I'm going to need to defend it. Knight to c2, and now I'm set up and I'm good to go. Everything is defended. Okay, very interesting. So you guys see what I learned. I was just kind of looking through the lines. I was using Stockfish to help me, and I discovered this important characteristic of the French that I did not know about. Prior to this video, I didn't know this, right? I learned this as I was explaining it to you guys. But I need to pay attention. Is it the bishop or the queen coming out? That's important. And that's going to determine, do I play knight to a3 and knight to c2? Or do I play bishop e2 and castles? Okay? So at this point, this is kind of a critical moment. So what I would do is just recap and refresh this in my memory a couple times. So it's okay. If they play the queen out, that's obvious to me that they are making it a priority to go for this. The next thing that's going to happen is going to be one of these two knight moves, and they're going to pile it on. So because of that, I have to play knight here, knight here. All right. And if they play bishop d7, that's telling me they don't really care about my d4 pawn as much, which means I don't need to go for this plan. I can just simply play bishop e2 and castles, which is a better plan for me. And now most people are going to do this, and I'm going to castle. And if they go for knight to f5, let me see what I do next. Okay, it looks like just capturing is the best thing. Interesting. They take, and then what do I do? Bishop d3. Okay, so this is kind of the way to go. All right, and so just to recap again, I'm going to just keep doing this till I feel comfortable. If they bring out the queen, I'm going to go knight a3, knight c2. If they bring out the bishop, I'm going to play bishop e2 and castle. And if they line up and attack me, I'm going to take here, and I'm going to play bishop d3. Okay. And I'm going to just keep doing this. All right, cool. So that's a good starting point. I'm feeling pretty good about this. And it's probably good for one video. I think in the next part, what I'm going to do is just go a little bit deeper with this. I'm going to maybe look for some of the top players, see if there are any, top grandmasters that have played some of these lines, check out their games, see what they did, try to really dive into their thought process. But I'm already feeling pretty good. And I've only been, I don't know how long this video is going to be, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. I don't know. But I'm already feeling pretty good about kind of having a system to play against the French. Okay, I'm going to play e5. I'm going to defend it. I'm going to defend it. And then depending on what they do here, I'm going to either play knight to a3 and knight to c2 or bishop e2 and castles. And if it sounds like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, I am. That's how I learn. That's how I memorize this. I just keep repeating it to myself, keep asking myself, what am I going to play against this? Oh, right, bishop e2 and castles. Because I'm not worried about defending d4 because the queen didn't attack it right away. Okay, what am I going to play against this? Oh, yeah, knight a3, knight c2 because I want to defend this. Oh, and yes, they can trade and get my knight, but then they lose their bishop, and I'm going to use this file later to attack the queen. Okay, I'm fine with that. That's it. That's what I learned. So I'm feeling good. We'll end it here. This will be part 1, and then we'll pick it up in part 2, and we'll keep going further. And this is the process, guys. And you can use, like I said, you can use this process for any opening. It doesn't have to be the French defense, right? Take this process, use the opening explorer. It's on chess.com. It's on Lichess. I recommend this book. I'll link it below. But that's basically how you do it. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. So, all right. Hope that helps you guys, and I will see you in part 2. All right. Stay sharp. Play smart. Take care.